Good morning. I'm Daniel Pullen, and I have the opportunity to serve as the Dean and the Freddie Brown Chair of the Michael F. Price College of Business here at the University of Oklahoma. I wanted to start by saying thank you for you all being here today at our second annual OU Energy Symposium here at the National Weather Center. This morning, I have the pleasure to introduce to you the longest-serving president in the history of the Big 12, and actually the second longest-serving president in the history of the University of Oklahoma, David L. Boren. He actually began his 20th year as president of the University of Oklahoma this year. Really fantastic longevity. President Boren is a visionary whose continuity of leadership consistently allows him to advocate for the needs of our students, enabling the university to grow in both size and stature. He is undoubtedly tenacious. He works tirelessly to ensure that the needs of our students are met and that our students know him not just as president, but in maybe a more important capacity, and that is as teacher. In fact, he's one of only a handful of major university presidents in our nation that teaches a course each and every semester. Pretty tremendous. No other public university in America has come as far and as fast in the last decade. Under his leadership, our campuses have been physically transformed. Our students have been given more resources for learning. Our faculty has been both strengthened in size and invigorated intellectually, and our spirit of community is wonderfully strong. Please join me in showing our appreciation and welcoming President David L. Boren.
Is this the mic? Is it working? Yes, it is working, I think. Let's see, were you using this mic? Okay, should work, it should work. Thank you all for being here. First, I want to thank all of our speakers, and I must admit I'm frustrated because this is a subject that interests me so much that I wish I could be here with you the rest of the day. Unfortunately, starting in about 15 minutes, I have to be somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and then somewhere else. And the day is kind of going along because it is April, but I wish I could be here and join you all day long. I want to thank first Dean Pullen for introducing me, and let me say that he's no longer interim Dean Pullen of the Price College of Business as of 2 weeks ago, and we didn't even have to wait for the mountain precincts to be counted. The regents unanimously elected him as the permanent dean of Price College, so we want to congratulate our newest dean at the university. And I know he's going to be a great leader. I knew him first as a student. He worked for a little bit on the action line in my office. He was president of the Interfraternity Council, and then one day he turned up among those students who had a 4-point or an almost 4-point average, and I said, "Oh, Daniel, I never dreamed that you had that good an academic record," because he certainly was active on campus and all sorts of social and other activities. And of course, some of you know the rest. He was snapped up by McKinsey immediately when he graduated from OU. That's very unusual for McKinsey to take an undergraduate into their organization. They sent him off later to Harvard, where he got his MBA at the top of his class, and then he went to work back for McKinsey, and then Hicks Muse raided him, and he started 2 new businesses before he was 30. And meanwhile, I was stalking him. I was going to Dallas, and every time I was there, I'd say, "Let's have dinner together." And then, of course, I'd say, "You have to come back to OU someday and help us here," which he has. On his way back, by the way, he got a law degree along the way. So he has been a phenomenal leader, and we're really lucky to have him. And Dean Grillat, this is in the back. He is one of our more senior deans, and he was the founding dean of the Mewburn College of Earth and Energy, which of course is petroleum engineering, geological studies, our historic strength at this university, which goes back longer than any other university in the country, and we're always in the top ranks nationally. So Larry, would you stand up and just let us thank you for your leadership of the Mewburn College. Well, this is an exciting time for the industry, and the topic really today is our emerging energy independence. It's a topic that at the time I served in the U.S. Senate I couldn't believe would ever be discuss. So it's an exciting topic and tremendously exciting to see what the industry has been able to do for the entire country in the last few years. We know its importance here in Oklahoma, where 1 out of every 4 jobs is directly or indirectly dependent upon the energy industry. So it's crucial to us, and we have a strong understanding of its importance to the country. And we're really glad to have especially our guests that are here today here at the Research Park. This has been an incredible time like it has for the industry. It's been a time of energy and motion for the university. The university, during this last year, as many of you have heard me say, our academic standards have become so high that we were the only university, public or private, and as far as we know, in the last 100 years, to have a Rhodes Scholar, a Marshall Scholar, a Mitchell Scholar, Goldwater Scholar, Truman Scholar, Truman Scholar, and Fulbright Scholars in the same year, all 6 in the same year. And as far, Harvard didn't have it, Yale didn't have it, Stanford didn't have it, MIT didn't have it, Texas didn't have it. The University of Oklahoma had it, and now we're in the next round, and just last week, I learned that we now have 46 Goldwater Scholars to our credit. We added 3 more this year in math and science, and that's an incredible accomplishment. In one single year in this new round, I've already been notified that we have 3 that have just been awarded Goldwater scholarships. So it's an incredible period of time. And you're in the middle of course, our University Research Park. 13 years ago, and I remember when we broke ground on this building, it was 13 years ago that we broke ground on the Weather Center. And everything around us, as far as you could see, was an open field. And we were all envisioning what could possibly take place here. The additional research buildings that will be built. We know the Stevenson 1 and 2 research buildings that have been built, that have been a home of biomedical engineering, genetics, and all sorts of subjects. The new laboratory, radar lab that is going up behind us. The Weather News headquarters next door that's controlling about 1,000 ships at sea in the Indian Ocean right now, among other things. The remarkable things that have been going on. Our partners' places, we're up to 4 to 5. We're growing all the time because we wanted the university research buildings along this street. Next would be our private sector partners, and then the infrastructure beyond. And remarkably, in just 13 years, this year we won the award from the National Association of University Research Parks. They've honored such places as Research Triangle and others. We won the award as the most, measured by our research, measured by our growth, the quality of what we're doing here, we were named the #1 University Research Park in the United States. So you're sitting in the #1 research park that used to be a vacant field. So it really is remarkable. And then, of course, we are in the midst of a place where the faculty is producing research at a very rapid rate. We are continuing to expand our research in the energy area. And last year also, for the first time, we finally achieved a 48-year goal of the university of being named a Carnegie One institution for research. And this really helps us become the engine of growth, economic growth for the state with a multi-billion-dollar impact. In fact, probably no other single institution except maybe Tinkerfield even rivals our comprehensive operation here, also particularly in Oklahoma City at the research campus, the Presbyterian Research Campus we've just acquired for our research growth on the whole state. So the energy industry is moving forward, the university is moving forward, and in many areas we're doing it hand in hand. And we're doing it in an interdisciplinary way. There's, of course, the bachelor's degree now at the College of Business and Energy Management. There's the new MBA in Energy Studies. There's the new short course in Executive Energy Management, and all of this in cooperation with the College of Earth and Energy. And we've come to realize in the energy field that we cannot separate the disciplines, that so often as we go out to explore, to drill, to open a major new find, for example, we're really dealing with an interdisciplinary team that is working together. There are geologists, there are petroleum engineers, and beyond that, there are business people who are part of the team that are looking at the potential return on investment. And I see John shaking his head because that's certainly something that Devon has done so well, as it has grown to be one of the most important independent producers in the world. And we have them here in Oklahoma, and we're so lucky along with the others that we have here today. But it is remarkable to see what has happened. I think back to just a short time, that just seems like a short time ago to me, although I have to be very careful about that. My students informed me the other day, we were not born when you were governor. Then they went on to say, we weren't born when you were U.S. Senator. And then they really went on to really get me. And I know when Daniel said the longest serving, you were probably wondering if I'd make it up to the podium. But then my freshman said to me this year, we weren't born when you became president of the University of Oklahoma. Now that really does sort of begin to sort of dig at you a little bit. But when I was in the Senate, I had the privilege of chairing the Committee on Energy Taxation of the Finance Committee. And of course, for Oklahoma, that was a very important position. Senator Kerr had held that position years ago. And when I got to the Senate, everyone said to me, we want you, like Senator Kerr, to gain tremendous influence in the area of energy policy and energy taxation. We want you on the Finance Committee. We want you on that subcommittee. And I got to be chairman. And I remember how we struggled. We took up things, and I was actually able to make the motion to end the so-called windfall profits tax, and to introduce for the first time the ability to deduct intangible drilling costs, and also tax credits for marginal wells, because we were desperately trying to keep in production those wells that were really declining at a rapid rate. The price of oil was low. We were really in a struggle for survival, and everything that we could do on the tax side to try to keep the industry going was extremely important. And I remember the year I had a conversation, the year I left the Senate to come home to the university. And I was talking to experts at what we would call the Department of Energy. And they said to me, we believe that in the next 15 to 20 years, so by now, we will be 80 to 85% dependent upon very uncertain foreign sources for the energy that this country needs, particularly the oil and gas. And so that was the kind of outlook. That was the kind of pessimism. We were fighting a rear guard action, so to speak, those of us from energy producing states, to try to keep the industry alive, just hanging by a thread, so to speak. And now here we are. And we either have passed the moment or we're about to pass the moment when this country is now energy independent. And at the same time I was serving as chair of the taxation subcommittee, I was also chairing the intelligence committee. And constantly we were talking about the national security threat to this country and the need to, in some places, even take military action if necessary, risk the lives and treasure of the country to protect our energy sources. And we used to talk about the fact that how unfortunate it is that the creators seem to have put oil and gas under countries that were politically unstable or unfriendly to the United States, whether it was the Soviet Union, then Russia, whether it was the Middle East, whether it was Venezuela, wherever it might happen to be. And we talked about that. Now you think about it. What will the impact of growing energy independence, and in my mind, hopefully, eventually, energy exports into the world market from the United States, what impact will it have? I read a report the other day that said, it was talking about Putin and the Ukraine and all the rest of it, and he said there is one chink in his armor, and that is the growing energy independence of the United States and our ability to keep him from using the oil weapon and the gas weapon to the degree that he could use it otherwise. It changes the whole flavor and the whole tenor of international affairs and how we define national security. What is the concern in the Middle East today? The concern, as you see it from leaders in that part of the country, is will the United States remain the kind of presence in the Middle East that it has been before? because in part we were protecting not only the rights of those countries, but also we were protecting our own energy supplies as well. So will the United States remain an important player in the Middle East? What kind of role should the United States, with its growing energy independence, have in critical areas of the world like that? So it's not just a matter that we have started using horizontal drilling and fracking. And by the way, I'm really proud of our Oklahoma companies because they have been among the first to understand that we have to be environmentally sensitive. And Oklahoma companies have led the way in the filtration of water so that, for example, in our new drilling activities, horizontal drilling and fracking, we can recycle and reuse the water. And they've been among the first to do that, to begin to show that that's possible. There are long routes ahead, but we are blazing the way as we've always done. You know, it was Oklahoma that created the Interstate Oil and Gas Commission. It was Oklahoma members of Congress. It was Oklahoma that wrote the first oil and gas law. Great professors like Gene Kuntz, who wrote the law on oil and gas and gave the first compendium of it that really told us what best practices were, how we should move forward, what should the law be, how do we deal with changing technologies and circumstances, and now we're dealing with it again within the law, within procedures that we follow, and how do we do it well. So I just want to say this is a really dramatic moment in the history of the country. It's a very dramatic moment as it relates to energy, but the way in which energy affects everything in our lives, including our foreign policy, including military operations, including all sorts of ways in which we really don't understand yet the full implications of what our movement toward energy independence, or I might rather say our achievement of virtual energy independence, has meant to this country. So I simply want to say thank you to our speakers this morning and welcome. Thank you to the energy industry for its creativity, its tenacity, for everything that it's doing to enhance the security of this country. And I would just leave by saying to the industry, keep it going. Keep up the good work. Thank you all very much and welcome this morning. Really appreciate having you here.
Thanks very much, President Bourne. You've got a wonderful insight into all this from your past experience, and you're living in the middle of it now in Oklahoma and at this institution. I'm Bruce Stover. I'm chairman of the advisory board for the Energy Institute. My pleasure today to introduce our moderator, Bill Megginson. Bill is the Rainbolt Chair of Finance at the Business School, Price College of Business here. He's going to be our moderator today. Our first speaker will be John Rochelle, who's the president and CEO of Devon Energy. John's going to talk about the sustainability of hydrocarbon energy resources, which have underpinned the renaissance of our energy situation in the United States. We're going to have two speakers talking about the economic impact of all this for us. And a little deeper dive, we hear a lot of talk about job creation and all this stuff. We're going to do a deeper dive into the economics. Tom Choi, as with Deloitte, he's the gas market lead, natural gas market lead for Deloitte and their research. Eric Lee is with Citigroup. Eric is going to talk about oil side of the business, how oil impacts the business in general and how it's driving economic growth in countries all over the world. Same way with natural gas for Tom. And then we'll turn it over to Robert Johnson. Robert is the head of energy practice for Eurasia Group in Washington. It's a group that advises on all matters energy globally. He's going to talk about the geopolitical impact. You heard President Bourne talk about that new position for this country. We don't really, I hope we all have a good understanding of this when this is done. And then our keynote speaker at lunch is Joe Stanislaw. Joe is the co-founder of Cambridge Energy Research Associates, CERA, along with Daniel Yergin, built that company up through many, many years of good work and international reputation. Joe lived in Europe for 25 years, I think, running really their global business outside the United States. Since then, he's, when Cambridge Xcerra was sold. He's formed his own company, now lives in Boston, and he's got his own global consulting company in energy. So I think we've got a really good group of speakers. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to John Rochelle, who's going to talk about resources. John.
Get this hooked up, Bruce. Well, thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you. Thank you very much, Bruce, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here, and to President Boren, Dean, we appreciate everything that you do here at the at OU and in the energy area. It's a terrific school. We've had a long relationship with OU. With Dean Grillet's folks years ago, did a lot of very good work on in the area of microseismic, and today we have a partnership on nanotechnology as well at Sarkis, and this is really a terrific school. I didn't go to the University of Oklahoma. I didn't have that pleasure, but it's a great school, and I will tell you that I've turned into an absolutely rabid Sooners fan to the extent that my wife doesn't like me to watch football because I think she thinks I'm going to have a stroke or something. But anyway, I'm very pleased to be here, and this is a great conference. Pleased to be here with the other speakers today. We've got a very knowledgeable group of speakers here, and I hope that we can share a lot about the industry. Bruce had asked me if I would talk a little bit, give some of the basics of where we are as an industry and where the industry is going in North America, what the resource base looks like, and kind of what the future of the business is. And we call this the energy revolution. It's kind of an evocative term to talk about revolution, but what has happened over the last few years is nothing short of miraculous in this industry. And I hope to share some of that with you. I'll just for some of you who might not be as familiar with Devon, I'll just tell you a couple of quick things about the company. We were formed in 1971 by John W. Nichols, who was a pioneer in the industry, and his son Larry, who's equally well known in the industry, and went public in 1988. It's grown a lot. It started off with 2.5 employees, as Larry likes to say, in 1971, himself and his dad, and a receptionist that they shared with the CPA next door, and it's grown now to 5,500 people in many offices. We're producing, we got about 2.5 billion barrels of reserves. We're producing somewhere around 600,000 barrels equivalent a day, and we're focused in a number of oily basins like the Eagle Ford, which many of you know in South Texas, and the Permian Basin, where we have one of the largest land positions. We got a very attractive position in the heavy oil business in Canada, and we also have large liquids-rich gas opportunities in the Anadarko Basin, and including our Cana field just west of Oklahoma City, and in the Barnett Shale, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And so we've been, a lot of folks know us as a gas producer, and we have produced a lot of gas. We produce somewhere between 3% and 4% of all the gas produced in the U.S. every day, but we're also a very large oil producer. You can see among those companies, we produce a lot of oil in the U.S. and Canada. So that gives you just a little bit of background of where we're coming from and where our knowledge comes from and where our experience is. So, I talked about revolutions. Revolutions, things happen when you have revolutions, and I want to just talk a little bit about this. President Boren was talking a little bit about this. When you think about where we have come from as an industry, it was not very long ago that, like when I say not long ago, I'm talking about 10 years ago or 12 years ago. We were thinking like this slide says. We were conditioned at that time to think of energy as a scarce resource. You've constantly heard the fact we were running out of oil. There were a lot of theories on peak oil theories that many of you know and have read. We had natural gas shortages. Natural gas was trading as recently as 2005, right after Katrina, at $13 an MC, 1,000 cubic feet. At the New York City gate, it was trading at, Bill and Sue, I don't know, but somewhere north of $20 at the time. So, that was not very long ago. And we are, in fact, figuring out how we could get more natural gas into the United States to meet our energy requirements for the future. And I remember being at the Howard Wheel conference a few years ago. It's a big energy conference, industry conference, and everybody was talking about bringing LNG in. I wish I'd kept the map, because there's this great map of all of the with red dots all around it, where all of the LNG facilities bringing liquefied natural gas into the United States were going to be located. So that's a decade ago. When you look at where we are today, the picture is very, very different. We're in the middle of this renaissance, of this shale renaissance. Started out as a shale gas renaissance, but it's become much, much more than that. And it's had an enormous impact, and really has been a game changer for us. And frankly, it's altering the global economy, and particularly the economy here in the United States, for the better. What's happened is I know there are folks in the room here with varying degrees of knowledge. Some are in the industry, some are not directly in the industry, so bear with me as I go through this, but I think it's important to think about this. Really, this has all come about as a result of really a geological paradigm shift. When you think about the industry and how it developed, and you can see this kind of cartoon here in this cross-section, we all knew that over geological time, hydrocarbons were formed in deep carboniferous formations under great heat and great pressure. And we all knew that as an industry, and there were deep sections, sometimes shallower sections, but they were these very heavily compressed sections that produced oil and natural gas. And over geological time, that oil and natural gas moved up through pores, it moved through fractures and faults, and kept migrating up until kind of got caught under something, got caught in a structure. And for 100 years, what we did as an industry is we found these structures, we drilled wells into them, and produced the oil that was there. And once in a while, you'd have a really big structure, you drill a whole bunch of wells into it, and we call it a field. And other times you had a bunch of little structures like this, and we still drilled into them all, and it was a field. Well, we're doing something quite different now. All through that time in the industry, we understood that oil and natural gas was being produced in these carboniferous zones, and we drilled through them for years, but we couldn't figure out how to get the oil and natural gas out. And bear with me for 1 second. I meant to dig something out here. I forgot to bring it up with me, but so we were drilling through these deep carboniferous sections, and they're the ones we commonly refer to as shale sections. And we knew that it was full of oil and natural gas, but you couldn't get it out. And what I wanted to bring up here is to show you what a piece of this shale looks like. This is an actual core out of the Barnett Shale. And I realize there's only 12 people that can actually see this here, but you can come up and touch it afterwards for those of you that have never seen it. But let me explain this to you. This is so dense. It's like the blackboards we had when we were in school. I'm going to show my age here, just like President Bourne did. I was speaking to a group a while ago, and there were a few kids in there, and I made that comment. I said, this is like the blackboards we had in school, and one of the kids said, what's a blackboard? So how do you figure that one out? Anyway, so you can see, if you come up here and touch this, you'll look at this and say, how could you ever get natural gas or oil through this kind of a structure? It's like the sidewalk out in front of the building here. So what we did is there was the real paradigm shift was that we figured out how to drill in that shale section and produce natural gas and now oil out of that very, very tight rock. And there was a a tremendous amount of work done by George Mitchell. He's kind of an industry legend. George lived in the woodlands in Texas and had a company, and they drilled for years and years trying to figure out how to do that. And the breakthrough finally came through when they figured out how to use hydraulic fracturing, and a different type of hydraulic fracturing than we typically had in the industry. For years we'd fractured, hydraulic fracturing started right here in Oklahoma in 1949. Been around for a long, long time. We used these heavy gel fracs, and the revelation was that they started using what they called a slick water frac, which is a very light substance. It's mostly water and sand. It's about 99.5% water and sand, and then a very, very small amount of emulsifiers and other things. And they figured out how to crack open this shale and start to produce out of the shale. Another big change in the industry came about when we started to horizontally drill, and that's what you can see here in this cartoon. Instead of a vertical well going through 500 feet of shale and trying to produce from that, we turned sideways, drilled horizontally, and exposed 5,500 feet of well bore to the shale, and did the same thing and started to produce significant amounts of oil and natural gas. And for those of you that have not seen it, I've got this little video here. You can see how that's done, how the well is drilled. This is thousands and thousands of feet, 1.5 miles underground, the mile below, and many, many impervious rock sections below any drinking water, anything like that. And we place a casing, we go into the well, and then perforate that casing, that metal casing, and then bring the hydraulic fracturing fluid, this proppant fluid mixture, and under great pressure inject it, and it cracks open for a few hundred feet. It cracks that structure open, and then we put facilities. We do this in stages all along the horizontal section of the well. Then we install facilities on the surface and produce oil or natural gas out of the ground. In this case, this was gas production. It gives you a little idea of what this whole process looks like. I've already mentioned the Barnett Shale. This is where it all started. This is where George Mitchell and his folks first developed some of the hydraulic fracturing technology. We were in the fortunate position of having known George, and we purchased his company in 2001, and we then took that hydraulic fracturing technology and married it with the horizontal drilling technology, and really started a lot of this renaissance. For those of you that are in the scientific end, it's a great this is a great example. I remember, and Steve Cromwell I see back there will remember this too. He was with Devon at the time, but we knew George Mitchell, and our technical folks went to see what they were doing, and it was not working in 1999. They hadn't figured out the key to getting that out of the ground and producing out of this shale. And in 2001, we asked them to go down again, and our scientific folks at the time said, we've just looked at it and it doesn't work. And it's a great example of why you shouldn't base things on dated information, because they did go down and came back and said, wow, this is actually working, and we were fortunate to do that. So since then, numerous plays have opened up in North America. So that technology that started in the Barnett Shale has moved, and you can see the shale basins mapped here in North America. We have a tremendous resource in North America, and we got great gas plays like the Marcellus and the Utica. You haven't even heard as much about the Utica. Utica is going to produce a lot of gas as well in the northeastern part of the country. We've got now some terrific tight rock with embedded shale oil plays in places like the Eagle Ford in South Texas and the Bakken. I know there's some folks here from Continental where you've got a tremendous position in the Bakken. Great play, again, we're producing a lot of oil. So this is really spread fairly dramatically throughout North America. And you can see what's happened to U.S. Shale gas production. If you go back to the Just over the last few years, less than 10 years ago, we were producing about a couple of billion cubic feet a day of shale gas. Today, it's up over 25% of the total natural gas in the country is produced from shale, and that's just continuing to go up. And through that time, something else started to happen. Over time, natural gas and oil have traded in relative parity from an energy equivalency point of view. So for most of my career, it was the natural gas and oil were trading within some bounds close to their energy equivalency. So that all that means is if you take the amount of energy that's produced by natural gas and convert it to a barrel of oil, they would have been trading in relative parity. Today, and for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, that has totally changed, partly as a result of the fact we've produced so much natural gas. We've found so much natural gas. It's much more available, and the cost of natural gas, the price of natural gas, has gone down fairly significantly. If you look at this energy equivalency, oil's trading at the left side of the chart gives you the oil price. So you see oil trading between $90 and $100. If you do the energy, gas is trading at, say, $4. The energy equivalency between natural gas and oil is about 6 to 1. So a barrel, the energy equivalency of natural gas is costing about $25 or $20 and compared to a $100 barrel of oil. So this great decoupling of natural gas and oil prices has occurred in the last few years. And that really drove us as an industry to also taking the same technology we used on the gas side in shale production to oil. And you can see what's happened on that side of the equation. The amount of oil that's come from shale and tight formations even 5 years ago was very little, and today we're producing 3.5, 4 million barrels a day. And that's been this great renaissance in on the oil side of the business as well. So it started with natural gas, and now it's come over to the oil side. And it's put us in an absolutely terrific position as a country. You look at that slope and you say, gosh, where's that going? And you hear stories about, are we going to, or questions about whether we're going to flood the world with light oil from the United States. And I'm always careful about that. And years ago, I was at a dinner listening to a well-known industry financial analyst who was asked for his predictions on where the Dow was going to go. And he made this point, and I always remember the story. He said, be careful about extrapolation. He said, let me tell you a little story. He said, in 1977, when Elvis died, there were about 150 Elvis impersonators in the United States. By 1995, that had grown to about 3,500. By early 2000s, that had grown to almost 9,000. And based on that, when I extrapolate, my prediction is that in 2030, 1 in every 3 people will be an Elvis impersonator. So you got to be a little bit careful about that. But the fact of the matter is that we've brought on a tremendous amount of oil and natural gas and put ourselves and our country in a very, very good position. And these two charts, these are sort of eye charts, but you can get the general trend. On the left, you see U.S. Crude oil production. On the right, you see natural gas production, and you can just see the dramatic increase that we've had in both. And as President Bourne said, energy security, which frankly, not very long ago was very elusive, is not a pipe dream anymore. This is real. And whether we can do it all in the United States, I don't know. But certainly we can in North America. And it's not a matter of being isolationist. It's a matter of national security as well. And between the oil that we produce in this country and the natural gas that we produce here and the amounts that we can get from our friends and neighbors in Canada and in Mexico, really puts us in a very enviable position in the world. And you're going to hear today some good discussion about some of the geopolitical consequences of all of this, and I won't get into that at all, but there's no doubt that they're two very important things in terms of the sustainability and the positioning of a country in the world. One is security of food, and the other is security of energy. And we're in the fortunate position in this country of having both. There are lots of winners and losers in this. So far, in this shale scene, U.S. has been a big winner. There's been an enormous manufacturing renaissance, and I'm really excited about that. I think we have the opportunity to do more for the manufacturing and industrial sector in this country than we've probably had just since the 70s or the 50s. I mean, it's really a remarkable chance that we have. Now we got to make sure that we don't do some things to derail that, but we really can. And I can tell you a couple little stories about this that are really graphic. I always kind of like to think about these examples rather than just making that statement. I was out with the president of one of the large steel manufacturing companies, and he was in town, president, CEO, and a couple of his senior folks. They were in town because we're a large customer of theirs. We buy tubulars, drill pipe, casing, string, that kind of stuff from them all over the United States and in Canada as well. And he was just telling us about his business. And just to make the point about what a renaissance this can be for the manufacturing center, he said, we have facilities, steel factories, in Ohio, in South America, in Western Europe, and in Asia. And he said, the most profitable plant we have is the one in Ohio, which is not what we think about. But it shows you that any industry that uses a lot of energy can have a tremendous advantage because of the abundant supply of good, clean, and American energy. And so we have a great opportunity here. And you're seeing it in other places as well. I was speaking with the CEO of CF Industries. CF Industries is a large fertilizer manufacturer. I think I'm right to say it's the second largest. There's a Norwegian company that's bigger, but the second largest fertilizer manufacturer. And years ago, when gas prices were fluctuating between $4 and $12, and it was hard to see where the supplies were going to come from, they moved their operations to the Middle East because they have a huge requirement of natural gas to manufacture fertilizer. And so they thought, if we get closer to sources of natural gas, we can hedge the transportation because 90% of all that fertilizer comes back to the U.S. because we grow so much food in this country. But they said, we got to get close to the gas, and then we can enter into 10-year contracts for shipping that will set the cost of shipping. Well, they're all coming back too. They're moving back to the country. And I think what isn't really quite understood yet, and I spend a lot of time with the investment community, and we talk about oil and gas demand and supply. And one of the things I think that we don't really have our arms around, because it's not easy to get the data, is just how much demand there's going to be on the industrial side. And I think, I don't want to sound like a gas bull here, but I think we could see more demand than people think from the industrial and manufacturing sector. So it's a great time. We've really reduced our oil dependency in many other countries, and some of them, as the president said, many of them that don't have our best interests at heart. We've lowered our energy bills, reduced carbon emissions. Natural gas burns with a third of the carbon emissions of coal and half the carbon emissions of oil. And so a lot of good things have come about as a result of this. And that point I made earlier, one time we were trying to figure out how we could bring liquefied natural gas into the United States. In the next couple of years, we're actually going to be exporting it. And we've had about 6 projects that have been approved now for the export of natural gas from the United States just because of the amount that we have. And if you look at quantity of natural gas, the potential Energy Committee, which is headquartered in Boulder, Colorado, has they've done an analysis, and they believe that we have over 100 years of supply of natural gas in the United States based on the technology that we have today. There are other basins worldwide that may be suitable for shale production. Some of them are, but there are some obstacles to that as well. Russia has some large deposits of shale, but they're still producing so much natural gas from conventional production, they haven't really tapped that yet. There's some in China, although a much smaller amount. Western Europe, it has some, but we have a unique confluence here of characteristics that work for us. We have the space, we have the technology, we have the resource in the ground, and we have the political will. You have to have all of those things. You can imagine in a shale play where you have to drill hundreds or thousands of wells sometimes over an area. It's a lot easier to do that in North Texas or in the Permian Basin than it is in Burgundy, France. And so it just hasn't occurred in a lot of other countries. We talked about the LNG, that this is real. There is going to be LNG production. Now, how much is a real question. There are about 22 billion cubic feet per day of projects that are on the books somewhere. People have proposed that they're examining. There have been, or considering, there have been applications filed with regulatory authorities for a bunch of them, but we don't think that 22 billion cubic feet of natural gas LNG facilities are going to be built. It's probably going to level out at the 6 to 8 BCF a day range, but it can have a tremendous impact, not only on the producing states, and like Oklahoma or Texas or Wyoming or Pennsylvania, but also on many, many other states where they'll be producing, they have manufacturing operations where they produce steel, places like California and Ohio and Illinois and other places. So it's a great boon for this country. I said earlier, our opportunity is abundant, but it's delicate, and I think we've got to be very careful with some of these things. We've seen a significant growth in regulation at the federal level that makes it more difficult, makes it very difficult to drill on federal lands. And as a matter of fact, that chart I showed you with oil production going like this and natural gas production going like that on federal lands, it's been going down because it's more difficult to get permits. The administration is proposing repealing the intangible drilling cost deduction. President Boren mentioned that. I always thought that intangible drilling cost was maybe the worst choice of a term in the history of industry, because it sounds like sort of an ethereal, airy-fairy stuff. It sounds like intellectual property or something. I didn't mean to, but yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to. But it sounds more like ideas than real costs. And where it comes from is tangibles in the oil and gas industry are things that you can poke and touch, like pipelines and wellheads and compressors and that kind of thing. Those are called tangibles, and everything else is an intangible. And the administration talks sometimes about eliminating subsidies. These aren't subsidies at all. What they are is expenses that can be deducted, the expenses of drilling wells that can be deducted by the industry. And we've done it for years. They're talking about cutting that off. And just to let you know what the impact of that is, so for Devon last year, it would have reduced, well, let me just go back 1 second. In this industry, we regularly invest about 120% of our cash flow. And you think about that and you say, especially the finance guys, you look at that and say, wow, that doesn't sound like a good deal. Investing 120% of the cash flow. Well, the reason we can do that is borrow money, we go to the equity markets, we bring in partners, we do all kinds of stuff to get more capital. But it's a horribly capital-intensive business. That's just the way it is. And so for us last year, and we're just a microcosm of the industry. We're a big enough company, we're just a microcosm of the industry. It would affect small companies, big companies, even the majors the same way. It would have reduced our cash flow by somewhere between 25 and 33%. So what does that mean? It means over time, you reduce jobs, you reduce drilling, you really start to undermine some of this great renaissance that we're seeing in the industry. So we've got to be careful about that. And we have not had a very friendly environment out of the administration in Washington. A great example of that is the Keystone Pipeline. Don't want to get into that too much, but for us not to buy our oil from our neighbor, our biggest trading partner, and our best friend, and instead continue to buy more of it from the Middle East or Venezuela or other parts of the world that don't have our best interests at heart, make no sense to me. And as a nation, what's really struck me, I grew up in Toronto, so and I spent a lot of time in the oil industry in Canada before I became a proud American and a proud Oklahoman. But my whole career in Canada, the thought process was, to the extent that Canada doesn't need oil and natural gas, it'll go to our neighbor because the United States needs it. And from our point of view as a country, I kind of look at what's happened with the Keystone Pipeline, and I say, the biggest shame of it is it's changed the view. It's like a light went on, and all of a sudden, Canada's saying, hey, maybe it's not that smart to have one customer that you're totally reliant on. Well, that's not good for us. We just as soon be getting the oil and natural gas from Canada and not be dependent on other places. And that, I'll tell you a little story. I spent a bunch of years early in my career, seems like a lifetime ago, in the legal profession. I did a lot of large kind of mergers and acquisitions, securities work, and that type of thing. I was working for a company. We were doing a financing for a company called Barrick Gold. It's a big gold manufacturer, and so it has kind of a legendary founder and chairman by the name of Peter Monk. And we're talking about and some of the finance folks here could relate to this. We're talking about the utility of having larger or more banks in a banking syndicate or less banks. And one of the guys said, well, let me give you Peter Monk's view of the world when it comes to that. Here's what he thinks. One God, one wife, two bankers. And that's a little bit of what happened in Canada with this Keystone Pipeline. They all of a sudden said, man, we got to do something. So now there's a proposal by TransCanada to take a bunch of unutilized natural gas pipes that are already laying across the country and take that oil to the East Coast, to St. John, New Brunswick, rather than bringing it here. And what's going to happen is there's a deep water port there, gets loaded onto big vessels, it can go to Europe. Now with the change to the Panama Canal, it can go to Asia. And the ludicrous part of it is a whole bunch of it is going to be loaded, it's going to go around Florida, and it's going to go to the Gulf Coast, which is exactly where the Keystone Pipeline should go. So I probably spent more time on that than I should have. If you look at the industry and where we're going these days, it's a different industry. For my whole career, this business has been all about capturing resources. And it isn't today. We've got a lot of resources. Small companies have good resources. Big companies have a lot of resources. And so what we really are doing now is trying to figure out how to most economically develop those resources. And that's going to really distinguish our industry in the future. And that's where we need so much help and so much input from our educational institutes and from all the smart people coming into this business. We got to figure out how to be very, very efficient. We talk about here about bunts and the singles and bunts and perfect execution. That's really what it's about. And automation is helping in so many ways to allow us to do that. The reason that it's so important is when you're drilling hundreds or thousands of wells in these shale plays, the difference between making a good rate of return and making zero, getting your return of capital, might be $1 million on a well. And $1 million on a $5 million or $6 million well. It has a tremendous impact, and we got to really focus very much on that. President Boren basically described this slide. All I was wanting to say, this again isn't an eye chart, I don't want you to figure out what it all says, but for many years we worked in silos in the industry. The geologists, the engineers, the land people, and the finance people, they all worked in silos. And today we got to bring all of that together. If you're going to be really efficient, you have to have this integrated approach to the business and a very analytical approach to the business, because you have to really show excellence. Location is everything, and we need really the best and the brightest minds to bring these things together. We've had such a good relationship. Academic partnerships are important. We've had such a great relationship with OU. I mentioned earlier the microseismic work that we've done. and our nanolab work. And just what we're talking about here is we're looking at pores in the rock that are so tiny you can't see them with a normal microscope. And we're trying to see pores that are a nanometer in size. So that's a billionth of a meter. And so many of the things that are happening in this industry are really, really exciting today. We're using formation microscanners, which take billions of electrical impulses and build them into a picture of what a formation looks like. We're doing 3D seismic to build very detailed formation images. And you know, so many people think about this industry as being kind of a low-tech industry. It is as high-tech industry as you will ever run into. So I just thought I'd leave you with this. You know, I was talking earlier about the fact that that we're bringing all these new ideas to old areas, and this is a quote I just thought this was terrific. It says, "We usually find oil in new places with old ideas." That's conventional technology, right? Sometimes we find oil in an old place with a new idea, but we seldom find oil in an old place with an old idea. Several times in the past, we thought we were running out of oil when we were actually running out of ideas. You know, that is such a prophetic and nascent comment to me. You think that with everything that's gone on in our industry, that point could have been made yesterday. It was actually made by Park Dickey, who was a professor at the University of Tulsa back in the days when Tulsa was labeled oil capital of the world, and he made that comment in 1958, and it's every bit as true today as it was in 1958. So with that, I appreciate you listening to me, and Bruce, I hope I left enough time for a couple of questions, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, John. It was an amazing speech. It's not often you see a CEO who can use visual aids as effectively as you do there. Yeah, conveyed it perfectly, right?
Look, I'm not a technical guy, so this helps me too. You know, I'm a lawyer by profession, so.
And to see the animation of the drilling, a fascinating talk. I think we all have a huge number of questions, and I have the privilege of kind of going first. You kind of set yourself up. One of the things is, what are the limits to the growth that we can see in the natural gas production and the oil unconventional oil? And is it sustainable, and how far could it actually go?
Well, I think it is sustainable. Again, it's we've had such an expansion of the industry over the last few years, bringing some different technology to it. And while you can't expect that to happen every day, bringing technology to this industry is not over yet. And so we already know that we've got an enormous amount of natural gas. On the oil side as well, again, some of the big oil-producing basins where we're now producing from these tight formations. So places like the Eagle Ford Shale, and many of you know that name. It's come from nowhere to being a big production area. The Bakken in North Dakota, which has revolutionized the northern states. Gosh, all of a sudden North Dakota has got like 0.4% unemployment rate or something like that. Tremendous things happening there. The Permian Basin, where we're going in and drilling these very tight formations, we're only getting just a fraction of the oil out of the ground. In many of those areas, we're getting about 10% of the oil that's in the ground out through this technology. And I think the next steps in our industry over the next while, and some of you are going into this field, some of the students here are going into the field, and you're going to be the next smart folks that figure this out. You're going to figure out how to, instead of get 10% out, how to get 20% out, or how to get 40% out. And you know, and there are many areas that we haven't even tapped into. The shale oil in Utah and Colorado and places like that. You know, some of that is price dependent, because depending on where prices are and whether it makes economic sense or not. But let me move that down a little. But I think there's still a lot of room for growth on both the natural gas and the oil side of the business. And again, we're in such a very enviable, I think, position in here in the United States. And we got two great neighbors that have a lot of resource. Canada's got a lot of resource, and Mexico's got a lot of resource. And Mexico is just opening up. Canada is very much less, I think, explored than the U.S. is. So this North American complex, I think, can grow natural gas and oil production for a long time, and it puts us into a very, very good position.
One more question, and then I'll throw it open to, we'll start with our students. What are the policy elements that we need to have in place if you could wave a wand and design the ideal or even a rational energy policy? What would be the key elements of that?
Well, you know, I think that we need to have an energy policy that I think that encourages the production of these great resources that we have rather than tries to discourage them. And you know, we've got a current political system, I think, where we're picking winners and losers, where we're not encouraging the development of our resources. And so, as much as anything, I think what we need is just some policies that aren't restricting the industry in what we can do. And look, that doesn't mean we don't want to go out and drill without regulation or anything like that. That's not the case at all. But and this industry is very, very, very conscientious about what we do as an industry. It's amazing to me, and those of you that are in the industry or those of you going into the industry, you should be real proud of the U.S. industry. I can tell you, I've traveled around the world. We've had operations in other parts of the world. We've sold some of those operations. And I remember actually at one point in time I went to, just to give you an idea of how much more conscientious and focused we are as an industry in the United States over other parts of the world, at a time when in the Barnett Shale we were putting these things they call miser valves on our compressors, or like little thimble-sized things that we were installing to make sure that there was not a whiff of methane that was being released from it. I went to Equatorial Guinea on the west coast of Africa, and it was kind of an interesting experience. We had an interest there that we'd acquired through a company we bought in a large field, oil field, offshore, about 25 miles offshore Equatorial Guinea. There was a large FPSO, that's a floating storage, offloading, and production facility. It's a big ship that basically acts as a production facility. And we got to the helicopter facility in the morning, and we had to wait for a while because it was kind of a hazy day, hot and humid day, but it was very hazy. The helicopter couldn't take off. And then we did take off, and we flew out towards this ship, and it was the ocean was like glass, and it was kind of hazy. It was a really neat experience. All of a sudden, I looked in the distance and I saw this big orange glow, and I thought, what the heck is that? We got out there, and from these facilities, they were producing about 300 million cubic feet a day of natural gas that was just being flared and burned off. And you know, I kind of contrasted that to what we're doing, and so I mean, the whole idea of sustainable development, environmental responsibility, is not mutually exclusive. We can do both, and we do in many ways. And what we need is policies that encourage that and work together rather than work against the industry.
Thank you very much. I think we'll start with our students, and a very quick anecdote about this. When I've been here for 16 years, and about the second year I was here, at one point our petroleum land management program at the University of Oklahoma, which we've had for many decades, had 7 students. Had dwindled down to that. Now we have, I think, well over 100. There are some of our best students. There's certainly get some of our very best jobs. So with that lead-in, students, does any questions? You have a once in a lifetime, well, maybe not, hopefully, a chance to talk to the president and CEO of Devon. So
I actually had a great opportunity to meet some of the students on Monday. I guess that was Monday. They were at the IPAA, Independent Petroleum Association of America conference in New York City, and it was real nice to spend a few minutes with some of you.
So who's brave enough to start?
So
Please.
you talked about
Yes, sir.
Exporting natural gas. Where do you see that taking the price, and do you think we can sustain that type of production to become energy independent and a net exporter?
Could you hear that question? The question was, I mentioned earlier that we're building facilities to export liquefied natural gas, and the question is, what's the effect going to be on price, and can we export natural gas and still have a thriving business at reasonable prices here? Is that a fair characterization? The answer is, I think we can. And as I said earlier, I actually don't think, and I don't think we believe as a company, that we're going to see 20 billion cubic feet a day of export capacity built in the United States. It's probably going to be 6 to 8. We're producing, as an industry now, 72 billion cubic feet a day or thereabouts in the United States. We get another something like 6.5 BCF a day from Canada. We actually import about 9 and export 2.5 to Eastern Canada. We export a little bit to Mexico. But so you're talking about a little less than 10%, and that's at a time when most of the industry actually hasn't been drilling a lot of natural gas anymore. It's been absolutely one of the real revelations to me. We talk about the Anadarko Basin interest that we have. It's a big interest, or the Barnett Shale. We produced out of the Barnett Shale for a while. We were producing 2% of the gas consumed in the country produced in the country every day. We haven't even been drilling there. We have 2 rigs running there. We used to have 30 at one time. But there's been a lot of natural gas that's come on as associated gas in some of these oil plays. And so you could just imagine that if we wanted to as an industry, I think we can actually ramp up very easily some of the natural gas production. And we have a long profile of opportunity. And that's only at today's technology. As we go down the road, when you're standing up here talking like President Bourne, that the kids in the room weren't born when you started, at that point in your career, you're going to see a totally different technology again that's going to open up more of this. So I think it's very doable, and it will not materially affect prices. And we can't assume that this industry can thrive at a $3 natural gas price either. There's very, very few plays in this country that work at $3. You probably need $4.50 or $5 gas. But if you talk to most consumers, power producers, industrial concerns, if you have a $4, $5, or $6 gas price, that works just fine. What we don't want is we don't want fluctuations that go from $4 to $13 and back and forth. So I think it is very doable. I don't think it puts us in any kind of a position of shortfall.
Thank you. Other questions from students? General audience. Question? Yes, sir.
My name is Janis Rakhan, and I'm an LLM student from Pakistan. I'm very much thankful to USA that Hunt and Morocco and USGS came in Pakistan, and in 1961, with the help of these companies and US Geological Surveys, we made our first discovery at SWE of 2 TCF. Currently, the EIA studies reports that we have 10 million barrels of oil in terms of the shale. We stand at 9th position, better than Canada, and we have got around 585 BCF of gas. And the technically recoverable BCF are 200 BCF of gas. Sorry, TCF of gas. Yeah. The prices that we are currently locked in, we have an LNG import contract with Qatar that is around $17 per MMBTU. With the Iran, it is $13 per MMBTU, and if the price goes up, of the reference crude prices can go to up to 25 based on the 2008 prices. And with the tablet of Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, we have a price of $11. Currently, under the policy of 2012, our price that is for onshore is $6.6 per MMBTU, that is available for the producer. For offshore, the price is $8 per MMBTU. So compared to importing LNG from Qatar, it's $17 and all that. We are so much lagging, we and India are so much lagging in terms of technology that guar is produced, which you are well aware, guar is produced in India and Pakistan. Right. But we import it for our fracking job from USA because we can't process the guar. So we need that technology, we need that investment. You see 10 billion barrels of oil, and around 200 TCF of gas. So what are your plans for investment in India and Pakistan?
We have a trade mission here.
Well, that's a very good question. And Pakistan and India do have some tremendous resources. And we're probably not the best to ask. We're really focused on North America, the United States and Canada, and got out of the international sphere a few years ago. We had interests in the South China Sea and West Africa and Brazil and Azerbaijan and a few other places, and we have moved out. But I think the keys though, and some of this is you need to do this internally, some of the keys to attracting investment are making sure that you have a country with good rule of law, which you have. I mean, some parts of the world, there isn't good rule of law. You can't count on contractual enforcement and things like that. So you need good rule of law. You need favorable economic terms for the production sharing contracts. I think that's been a downfall in some parts of the world because some production sharing contracts, I don't know if you all understand how these work, but in many parts of the world, you have obligations to drill, and once you find something, you're allowed to recover your costs, and then after cost recovery, well, before cost recovery, there's a splitting of the profits between the country and the producer, and after payout, it becomes larger for the country. Some of those production sharing contracts have become repressive in some ways. I mean, there are many parts of the world where, as an industry, you can't, in particularly drilling offshore, where you're drilling wells for $100 million.
Sir, it is 35% IOC take stable. I mean, if the production increases, there won't be any progressive take.
Right. Well, so that's another thing you have going for you. But in many parts of the world, that's not the case. So it caps the return for companies at 20%. Well, you're drilling in difficult conditions in foreign countries, a 20% return isn't great. We can drill in western Oklahoma and make a 40% rate of return. So you have that going. But I think there has to be a continued focus from within the country to attract businesses in whatever way you can. And you have had some that have moved there. Cairn is a good company in that part of the world, and actually Rick Bott from Continental right here in town was the president and CEO of that company for a while. Yeah, from Devon's point of view, we're not likely to do that just because that's not where our focus is, but there are many other companies that I think will. But really have to, just the same way as a state, we try to attract businesses. As a city, we try to attract businesses. As a country, we try to attract businesses. I think it has to be some of that coming from both sides.
Well, I'm sure we could go on like for many minutes, but we need to move on. So thank you very much.
Thank
John.
you. I appreciate it.